What if everything you've been told about love is wrong? Carl Jung, the legendary psychologist, believed that most people confuse love with attachment, fantasy, or even selfish need, but true love is something far deeper. It's not just about romance, it's a profound psychological and spiritual journey. So how do you know if what you're feeling is the real thing? Carl Jung's insights into love go beyond fairy tales and surface-level passion. He saw love as a force that shapes not just our relationships, but our very souls. According to Jung, real love isn't about finding your other half. It's about becoming whole yourself while walking alongside another. It demands self-awareness, courage, and the willingness to face both light and shadow. But how can you recognize it? In this video, we'll explore the 7 unmistakable signs of true love, according to Jungian psychology, signs that reveal whether your relationship is rooted in deep connection or mere illusion. Sign number 1. Love is not possessive. Carl Jung's vision of love was radically different from the cultural myths that portray it as ownership or emotional dependency. He believed that true love flourishes only when both individuals are free, not just physically, but in their thoughts, desires, and inner growth. Possessiveness, in Jung's view, isn't love at all, it's fear disguised as affection. When we try to control another person, whether through jealousy, demands, or subtle manipulation, what we're really revealing is our own insecurity, not devotion. Real love doesn't chain, it liberates. It says, "I choose you, but I do not claim you." This distinction is crucial because so many relationships suffocate under the weight of expectations rather than thriving in mutual respect. The line between love and attachment is often blurred, but Jung's psychology draws it clearly. Attachment is rooted in need. It clings, fears loss, and seeks comfort in the familiar, even when it's unhealthy. Love, on the other hand, is rooted in strength. It doesn't vanish when the other person changes or pursues their own path. Think of the difference between a closed fist and an open hand. Attachment grasps tightly, terrified of emptiness. Love holds lightly, trusting that what's meant to stay will stay. This doesn't mean love is indifferent. It means it prioritizes the other's humanity over one's own cravings for security. A striking example of this principle is how healthy relationships nurture personal growth rather than stifle it. Consider 2 people who support each other's ambitions, even when those dreams pull them in different directions temporarily. A partner who encourages the other to study abroad, take a risky career leap, or spend time alone to reflect isn't acting out of neglect. They're practicing Jungian love. They understand that individuality isn't a threat to intimacy. It's the very thing that keeps it alive. In contrast, toxic relationships often demand sacrifice of the self under the guise of commitment. Jung would argue that this is backwards. Only by honoring each other's wholeness can a couple create something enduring. This idea also confronts one of society's most pervasive myths, that love means 2 people complete each other. Jung rejected this entirely. His concept of individuation teaches that we must first become complete within ourselves, facing our shadows, integrating our contradictions, before we can authentically love another. Otherwise, we risk using relationships as crutches, projecting our unmet needs onto our partners. True love begins when we stop demanding that someone else fill our voids and instead appreciate them as separate, sovereign beings. It's the difference between saying, "I need you to be happy," and "I am happy, and I celebrate you." Ultimately, Jung's perspective calls for a courageous kind of love, one that embraces uncertainty and rejects control. It asks us to examine whether our actions come from generosity or fear, from admiration or dependency. In a world that often equates passion with possession, this first sign of true love is perhaps the hardest to live by and the most transformative. Because when we finally release the instinct to own, what we gain is far richer, a connection that's chosen freely, every day, by 2 people who don't belong to each other but choose to walk together. Sign number 2. You accept their shadow. One of Carl Jung's most profound contributions to psychology was his concept of the shadow, the hidden, often unconscious parts of ourselves that we reject, deny, or suppress. These might be traits we deem unattractive, embarrassing, or even shameful: our anger, selfishness, insecurities, or past mistakes. But Jung argued that true love isn't about finding someone who fits a perfect ideal. It's about embracing the whole person, shadow included. When we love authentically, we don't just adore the polished, socially acceptable version of someone. We accept the messy, contradictory, and imperfect human beneath. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or harmful behavior, but rather recognizing that flaws are an intrinsic part of being human. To love someone's light without acknowledging their darkness is to love an illusion, not a real person. Modern relationships often suffer from a kind of projection sickness, where we unconsciously assign our own unmet needs or fantasies onto our partners. We expect them to be endlessly patient, perpetually kind, or eternally exciting, qualities no human can sustain. Jung warned that this idealization is a trap. When we project perfection onto someone, we set them up for failure and ourselves for disappointment. Real love requires seeing the other clearly, not as a blank screen for our desires. It asks, "Can I love you when you're not who I imagined you'd be?" This shift from projection to acceptance is painful but necessary. It means releasing the fairy tale and choosing the flesh and blood reality instead. A powerful example of shadow acceptance is loving someone through their struggles, not as a fixer or savior, but as a witness. Imagine a partner who loses their job and spirals into self-doubt, or a lover who reveals a childhood trauma they've carried in silence. In these moments, we face a choice. Do we withdraw because their pain disrupts our comfort? Or do we meet them where they are, without judgment? Jungian love leans toward the latter. It understands that vulnerability is the gateway to intimacy. When someone shares their shadow with us, their fears, regrets, or perceived weaknesses, they're offering us their truth. To reject it is to reject a part of their soul. This doesn't mean we should romanticize toxicity or stay in relationships that erode our well-being. Jung's point is subtler. Love isn't about fixing someone's shadow but acknowledging it, in them and in ourselves. Often, the traits that irritate us most in others are the ones we've disowned in ourselves. A partner's stubbornness might trigger us because we've denied our own. Their neediness might repel us because we fear our own dependence. In this way, relationships become mirrors. The more we make peace with our own shadows, the more compassion we can extend to theirs. Ultimately, Jung's vision of love is deeply honest. It asks us to confront the uncomfortable truth that no one is perfect, and that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay, it's what makes love real. When we stop demanding that our partners conform to our fantasies, we open the door to something far more precious, a bond that's rooted in reality, resilience, and mutual grace. This is the alchemy of shadow work in love, the transformation of despite into because. Because you are flawed, I see your humanity. Because you are whole in your brokenness, I love you. Sign number 3. Love inspires growth. Carl Jung's concept of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming our most authentic, integrated selves, reveals a startling truth about love. The healthiest relationships don't just make us happy, they make us grow. Unlike the shallow comforts of codependency, where two people cling to each other out of fear or emptiness, Jungian love acts as a crucible for transformation. It challenges us, stretches us, and at times even unsettles us, not out of cruelty, but because real love refuses to let us stay stagnant. When two people are committed to their own and each other's evolution, the relationship becomes more than a partnership. It becomes a living, breathing journey toward wholeness. This kind of love doesn't shy away from difficult conversations or uncomfortable truths. Instead, it embraces them as opportunities for deeper understanding. Imagine a couple where one partner feels called to pursue a creative passion, writing, painting, or starting a business, but fears the risk of failure. A relationship rooted in Jung's principles wouldn't just offer passive encouragement. It would actively create space for that exploration, even if it means temporary sacrifices or disruptions to the status quo. Because true love recognizes that stifling a partner's growth to preserve comfort is a kind of slow suffocation. It understands that the unlived life, the dreams we abandon to please others, eventually poisons intimacy. To love someone is to want them to become more themselves, not less. The same principle applies to inner work. Jung believed that until we confront our unconscious patterns, our fears, traumas, and inherited scripts about love, we're doomed to repeat them. A partner committed to growth won't enable your avoidance or collude in your self-deceptions. They'll gently, but firmly, reflect back to you when you're acting from old wounds rather than present truth. For example, if you're stuck in people-pleasing, they might point out how your constant self-effacement is eroding your voice. If you're trapped in perfectionism, they'll remind you that love isn't earned through performance. This isn't criticism, it's alchemy. The goal isn't to fix each other but to create a space where both can shed what no longer serves them. Of course, this requires immense trust and vulnerability. Growth is rarely linear. It involves setbacks, confusion, and moments of regression. A Jungian approach to love makes room for these stumbles without rescuing or infantilizing. Think of a partner who struggles with anxiety. The loving response isn't to eliminate every stressor for them, which would only reinforce dependency, but to support them as they develop their own resilience. It's the difference between saying, "I'll handle this for you," and "I believe in your capacity to handle this, and I'm here while you learn." Ultimately, love that inspires growth is love that sees potential. It looks at a person and whispers, "You are not yet who you could be, and that's beautiful." This vision is what separates transactional relationships from transcendent ones. It's why the healthiest couples often describe feeling both deeply known and continuously surprised by each other, because when love is alive with possibility, no one stays the same. In Jung's words, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And transformation, after all, is the surest sign of life. Sign number 4. It's more than just passion. The intoxicating rush of new love, the butterflies, the obsessive thoughts, the sense that you've finally found your other half, is one of life's most exhilarating experiences. But Carl Jung would caution us, what we often call falling in love isn't truly love at all. It's projection. At the heart of Jung's theory lies the concept of the anima, the unconscious feminine aspect in men, and animus, the unconscious masculine aspect in women, archetypal images we carry within us that shape our attractions. When we're captivated by someone, we're often not seeing them as they are, but rather projecting our inner ideal onto them. This explains why the early stages of romance feel so magical. We're essentially falling in love with a fantasy, a mirror of our own psyche. The problem arises when the projection fades, as it inevitably must, and we're left facing a real, flawed human being where our dream once stood. This distinction between projection and authentic connection explains why so many passionate relationships burn out quickly. The intensity of infatuation is often inversely proportional to its depth. Jung observed that when two people relate primarily through these unconscious projections, their connection exists in a kind of psychic fantasyland, beautiful but ultimately insubstantial. True love, in contrast, emerges only after the projections have been withdrawn, when we've woken from the dream of perfect union to discover the richer, more demanding reality of loving an actual person. This transition from idealization to real seeing is painful but necessary. It's the difference between being in love with love and loving someone for who they truly are. What then sustains love when the fireworks fade? Jung would point to the quieter but more enduring foundations: friendship, respect, and what he called psychological relationship, the conscious, day-to-day choice to know and be known. Consider long-married couples who describe their partners as their best friends. Their bond isn't based on constant euphoria, but on shared history, mutual understanding, and the kind of comfort that comes from facing life's battles together. They've moved beyond the need for their partner to play a predetermined role, the perfect lover, the eternal caretaker, and instead appreciate them as a complete individual. This mature love includes passion but isn't dependent on it. It's able to weather seasons of boredom, conflict, and even temporary attraction to others because its roots run deeper than fleeting emotion. A striking example of this principle is how couples navigate midlife, when the projections of youth have fully dissolved. The husband realizes his wife isn't the eternally nurturing mother figure he unconsciously sought. The wife sees her husband isn't the fearless hero she imagined. For some, this realization spells the end of the relationship. But for those practicing Jungian love, it marks the beginning of something real, an opportunity to relate not as archetypes to each other, but as human beings. They discover new dimensions in their partner that the initial projection had obscured, the quiet strengths, the unexpected vulnerabilities, the evolving person emerging through years of shared life. This isn't to say passion has no place in lasting love. Jung valued eros as a vital force, but that it must be integrated with other forms of connection. The healthiest relationships maintain a spark not through constant novelty or drama, but through the courage to keep showing up authentically. When two people commit to seeing each other clearly, with all their contradictions, changing desires, and evolving selves, they create a love that's dynamic rather than static. It's the difference between a firework, spectacular but brief, and a hearth, steady, warming, able to be rekindled night after night. In Jung's vision, true love isn't about finding the perfect person, but about learning to see an imperfect person perfectly, which is to say, completely, honestly, and with an ever-deepening sense of wonder at the mystery of the other. Sign number 5. You feel whole, not incomplete. One of the most pervasive and damaging myths about love is the idea that we are incomplete until we find our other half. This notion, romanticized in everything from ancient Greek mythology to modern rom-coms, suggests that love is about filling a void within ourselves. Carl Jung vehemently disagreed with this perspective. In his view, authentic love cannot emerge from emptiness or lack. It must arise from a foundation of inner wholeness. When we approach relationships from a place of neediness, seeking someone to cure our loneliness, validate our worth, or give our life meaning, we set ourselves up for dependency rather than true connection. Jungian psychology teaches that real love isn't about finding someone to complete you, but about sharing your completeness with another. This distinction between love as completion and love as sharing is crucial. Codependent relationships, where two people unconsciously use each other to avoid facing their own inner work, are built on the illusion that another person can fix us. A classic example is the partner who relies on their significant other to regulate their emotions, demanding constant reassurance to soothe their insecurities or becoming emotionally unmoored when apart. Jung would argue this isn't love at all, but a form of psychological bargaining. I'll give you love if you make me feel secure. The tragedy of codependency is that it traps both people in a cycle of need and resentment, stifling genuine growth. In contrast, when two whole individuals come together, their relationship becomes a space of mutual empowerment rather than emotional bartering. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of integrating our conscious and unconscious selves, suggests that we must first become whole within ourselves before we can healthily unite with another. This means doing the difficult inner work, facing our shadows, healing our wounds, and developing the capacity to sit with our own emotions without fleeing into another's arms. Consider someone who jumps from relationship to relationship, terrified of being alone. Each new partner temporarily numbs their anxiety, but the underlying emptiness remains untouched. Jung would say this person isn't seeking love, they're seeking escape from themselves. Until they learn to be at peace in solitude, they'll continue projecting their unmet needs onto their partners, turning love into a form of emotional hostage-taking rather than free-giving. A powerful example of wholeness in love is when two people maintain their individuality even in deep connection. They don't lose themselves in the relationship. Instead, they bring their full, independent selves to it. You might see this in a couple who supports each other's separate friendships and hobbies, who can spend time apart without anxiety, or who don't demand that their partners share all their interests. Their bond isn't threatened by differences because it's not based on fusion, but on respect for each other's autonomy. This kind of love says, "I don't need you, but I choose you," again and again. The healthiest relationships function from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. When we're whole within ourselves, we don't love out of fear of being alone, fear of abandonment, fear of inadequacy, but from a genuine desire to share and connect. This shift transforms the nature of love entirely. Instead of clinging possessively, we're able to give freely. Instead of demanding constant validation, we're able to appreciate our partner without making them responsible for our self-worth. Jung's perspective invites us to reframe love not as a salvation from our incompleteness, but as a celebration of our wholeness. In doing so, we move beyond the child's hunger for someone to fill our voids and step into the adult's capacity to walk alongside another, not as two halves making a whole, but as two wholes making something greater. As Jung himself put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And only from that place of authenticity can true love begin. Sign number 6. Love has a spiritual dimension. For Carl Jung, the most profound experiences of love transcended psychology. They touched the realm of the sacred. He saw in romantic love an echo of the hieros gamos, or sacred marriage, an ancient archetype representing the union of opposites into a greater whole. This wasn't merely poetic metaphor. Jung believed that when two people connect at the deepest level, they participate in something timeless and universal, a psychological and spiritual alchemy that mirrors the divine. In this light, true love isn't just a personal bond but a cosmic event, a meeting point between human and transcendent. Those who have experienced this dimension of love often describe it in uncanny terms. A sense of recognition, as if they've known each other beyond this lifetime, or a feeling that their meeting was fated by forces greater than chance. Jung introduced the concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that defy logical explanation, as evidence of the psyche's connection to a deeper order. In the context of love, synchronicities often appear as signs. Perhaps you and your partner discovered you were in the same place years before meeting, or you share the same obscure childhood memory. These aren't just charming anecdotes. To Jung, they signal that the relationship serves a purpose beyond personal happiness. The universe, through these whispers of symmetry, hints that this love is part of a larger narrative, one that calls both individuals toward growth and transformation. A couple might find that their union catalyzes profound changes, healing old wounds, awakening creativity, or even altering life paths in ways that feel divinely orchestrated. Across cultures and eras, human beings have instinctively described transcendent love in spiritual terms, as a mirror of the soul's journey or a taste of the sacred. Jung would argue this is no accident. When we love deeply, we touch an archetypal reality. The lover becomes, in some way, a bridge to the numinous. This explains why the loss of such love can feel like a spiritual crisis, and why its presence can evoke awe. Consider the example of two people who, after meeting, experience a cascade of inner revelations, dreams that intertwine, intuitive knowing, or shared visions of the future. These phenomena, often dismissed as fantasy, were to Jung evidence of the psyche's boundless depth. In true love, the personal and transpersonal merge. The beloved reflects not just who we are, but who we might become when touched by grace. This spiritual dimension carries a paradox. While such love feels fated, it also demands conscious participation. The sacred marriage archetype isn't about passive bliss, but active co-creation. Jung warned that the euphoria of meant to be can devolve into entitlement unless paired with humility and work. Those who've known this depth of connection often speak of it as both gift and task, a calling to nurture something beyond themselves. A couple might feel they were brought together, but the real magic lies in what they choose to build with that spark. Here, love becomes a spiritual practice, a daily invitation to see the divine in each other's flaws, to forgive as the universe forgives, and to serve the bond as something holy. In Jung's vision, this is love's highest purpose, not just to make us happy, but to make us whole, and in doing so, to remind us of our place in the great mystery of existence. Sign number 7. It challenges you. The romantic ideal of love as endless harmony and effortless compatibility is not only unrealistic, it fundamentally misunderstands love's true purpose. Carl Jung saw relationships as the most powerful crucible for psychological and spiritual growth, precisely because they don't allow us to remain comfortable in our illusions. True love isn't soothing, it's transformative. It confronts us with all the parts of ourselves we've avoided, our insecurities, our controlling tendencies, our hidden wounds, and demands we face them. This is why the people we love most deeply are often the ones who trigger us most intensely. Their very presence acts as a mirror, reflecting back not just who we pretend to be, but who we actually are, in both our light and our darkness. What we call chemistry is often this unconscious recognition, an intuitive knowing that here is someone who will reveal us to ourselves, for better or worse. Consider how arguments in unhealthy relationships tend to be cyclical, the same fights about the same issues, with no real resolution. Jung would say this happens because we're not actually engaging with the root of the conflict, which is almost always internal rather than interpersonal. When your partner's messiness triggers your rage, it's likely touching a deeper wound, perhaps your childhood experience of chaos, or your fear of being out of control. In healthy love, these moments become opportunities for excavation rather than blame. A couple might fight about household chores, but if they're practicing Jungian awareness, they'll eventually ask, why does this affect me so much? What old story is this triggering? The argument then becomes a doorway, not a battleground. This is how love challenges us, by turning every friction point into a chance to know ourselves more honestly. The most growth-oriented relationships often feature what Jung called the containment of conflict, the ability to stay present with tension without fleeing or retaliating. Imagine a partner points out your defensive behavior. Your instinct might be to counterattack or withdraw. But if you can pause and consider their feedback, you begin the real work. This requires tremendous vulnerability, to admit that the person who knows you best might also see you most clearly, even when it's uncomfortable. Over time, this practice transforms the relationship into a sacred container where both people feel safe enough to be challenged, because they trust the love is stronger than the discomfort. The reward is intimacy that deepens through difficulty rather than in spite of it, a love that evolves as you do. Jung's vision reminds us that love isn't about finding someone who never disturbs your peace, but finding someone whose disturbances lead you to a greater peace. The partner who irritates your impatience is teaching you patience. The one who triggers your jealousy is inviting you to examine your self-worth. Even heartbreak, in this light, becomes initiation, a brutal but necessary stripping away of illusions. To love this way is to embrace a paradox, that the person who disrupts your world may be the very one helping you find your true place within it. In the end, we don't find ourselves by gazing lovingly into another's eyes, but by recognizing ourselves in the reflections, both flattering and unflattering, that their presence reveals. This is love's greatest challenge and gift, not to complete us, but to show us where we remain incomplete and to walk with us as we grow. Carl Jung's vision of love shatters the modern myths of romance, revealing something far more demanding and magnificent. Through these 7 signs, from releasing possessiveness to embracing challenges, we see that true love isn't a passive state of bliss, but an active path of awakening. It asks us to move beyond projection and neediness, to honor both light and shadow in ourselves and our partners, and to recognize that the deepest relationships are those that transform us at the soul level. This isn't the love of fairy tales, it's the love of alchemists, one that turns the base metal of our unconscious patterns into the gold of self-awareness and genuine connection. Jung's ultimate message is clear: love's highest purpose isn't comfort or completion, but evolution. The most profound relationships act as mirrors, guides, and sometimes even gentle provocateurs, nudging us toward our unlived potential. When we stop asking, "Does this person make me happy?" and start asking, "Does this relationship help us both grow?" we begin to experience love as Jung envisioned it, not as a security blanket, but as a sacred dance between two whole beings who choose to walk the path of individuation together. As we leave these insights, consider this invitation. Look at your closest relationships through this lens. Do they encourage your authenticity or demand your conformity? Do you feel larger or smaller when you're with this person? Are your conflicts repetitive, or do they lead to new understanding? Remember that transformation isn't always comfortable. If your relationship is challenging you, it may be doing exactly what true love should. The question isn't whether your love story is perfect, but whether it's alive with meaning and mutual becoming. That's the Jungian test, and the beginning of love's greatest adventure.